Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Transforming Government in a Mobile-First, Cloud-First World. Hello, I'm Bruce Rogers. I'm the Chief Insights Officer for ForwardKey Media, and joining me for this webinar is Kurt Colson, who's the VP of U.S. Public Sector at Microsoft. We do want to let you know that we are going to cover a lot of material, and a copy of today's slide deck and additional materials are available in the resource list, and there are links to them at the end of the presentation. Joining me today is Kurt Colson, who's the Vice President of Microsoft's U.S. Public Sector business. And Kurt has been instrumental in growing the public sector business with double-digit growth while obtaining highest customer satisfaction ratings in North America for that sector. He's been with Microsoft for over 25 years and has tremendous experience in the public sector, having been both at the Air Force and other government agencies. So he really understands the government arena and the public sector business. So welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, Bruce. Great to be here.
So with that, Kurt, let's get started. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of ground to cover, and most importantly, lots of insights from you to share. I wanted to give everyone a bit of a background on Kurt's experience. Not only has Kurt been at Microsoft for a while, but he comes from the public sector and was indeed in the Air Force, an airman in the Air Force, and really understands inside and out how specific and in many ways unique government protocols are, and how they're both exacting and in some ways perhaps challenging, Kurt, if I might editorialize there for a bit. As I said, he really brings tremendous knowledge about that.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I mean, we're looking forward to this. As you mentioned, I've been at Microsoft now over 25 years and over 30 years in the industry, all in public sector. And it's exciting times. It's one where technology is transforming. The pace of change and expectations from citizens, from elected officials, and from those people that work in government, their expectations are changing, and it's the opportunity for technology to really help transform government. And so, we're looking forward to the discussion today around how cloud is one of those key enablers.
Certainly, we'll talk today, as our agenda shows, about the case for the cloud. Certainly, the cloud. Which, and perhaps at some point, Kurt, we should probably even make some definitions around what we mean by the cloud, but certainly a set of technologies that is transforming how we work in every sector of business and as much in the government sector as it is in the private sector. And it's really both a tremendous disruptive force and, more importantly and long-term, a great enabler of opportunities. We'll walk you through the report that Forbes Insights created to help add some context and texture what's happening in the government sector. We have some case studies, which I think you'll find very interesting and telling. We'll talk about the very unique security and regulatory compliance issues, and this is really an area where Kurt is particularly expert around, and the challenges and opportunities and minefields that one must walk around to operate in a public sector. And then we'll talk about what folks can do next to get involved in the cloud. So as both I and Kurt were saying, the case for the cloud is all about the challenges that government faces in gaining insights around their operations, increasing management and resource agility, how to better connect business and technology, simplifying existing IT assets, and perhaps through what we're calling a hybrid cloud, and particular to this category, mitigating risk, though every good CIO has this foremost amongst their responsibilities, mitigating risk while maximizing innovation. And certainly we'll talk about the requirements of what this means as cloud-first policy and specific security controls and compliance, and as I said, government-only communities that have very special needs around this. So Forbes just recently published. We're pleased and honored to have worked with Microsoft on this. We'll show you how to get your own copy and download the report that provides some more in-depth context and storytelling around how various and diverse public entities are adopting successfully the cloud. And with that, we wanted to add some context of what the adoption statistics are around the cloud. They're pretty striking. The major story here is that like everywhere, the cloud is surging, and particularly in the government arena. The average growth rate in federal spending on cloud is rising by 21% and should reach over $6.5 billion by 2019. There's a greater than 50% of public sector cloud will account for more than half of all global software, server, and storage spending growth by 2019. That's stunning statistic in and of itself. And to put some context around this, the manager of the Cloud Computing Caucus Advisory Group, which is a nonpartisan group put together by Congress to really look into this deeply and how government can become more efficient through cloud adoption, tells us that we're on the brink of a surge in cloud, and more government agencies find success. As success and familiarity grows, the pace of adoption will only accelerate, and certainly Kirk can tell us about those experiences he's had. So, Kirk, tell us about Microsoft in this world and the role that it plays both in the technologies that you bring to bear and to the cloud in general.
Well, Microsoft, our overall focus, Bruce, is really being the productivity and platform company that really, lives and enables and transforms in this mobile-first, cloud-first world. It's sort of, we're transforming as a company as we, think about users and sort of what those experiences are. And if you sort of look at this chart, everything we do is predicated around the digital work and life experiences of the user. And in the case we're talking today, we're talking about government and government employees, but it's also true for citizens who need to interact with government. Today, even in the developing world, people have more than one device as far as how they operate and, how they do their work to be productive, both, from a work perspective as well as a personal perspective. And so, our approach here is to, create the technologies that really empowers users to be the most productive. And part of that approach of mobile first is cloud first, because to stay connected, whether I'm on my mobile device or I'm on a tablet or I'm on a laptop or I'm at a computer in the office or I'm working on a server, requires that technology interconnection and those capabilities, and we see those being brought forward in the cloud. It allows us to really think differently about how you get work done. And when I say mobile first, I'm not just talking about the device, whether it's a phone or a tablet. I'm really talking about the experience of the end user. Because from a Microsoft perspective, we don't care what device you use. At the end of the day, what's most important is that consistent experience across whatever device is most important to you at the time. In some cases, you'll have a phone. In other cases, you'll have a computer. You'll be able to have that rich experience, and to be able to provide that is that technology is enabled in the cloud And we're going to highlight that. And then additionally, from a Microsoft perspective, to create a more personal computing environment, we actually have our own hardware and devices that highlight what this empowerment is, whether it's the Microsoft Surface Compute platform or our phone devices. But this is the way we think about, how we enable productivity and empower end users in a mobile-first, cloud-first world.
And Kurt, so how do you put those products together on how do you go to market under that overall cloud for the government sector?
Well, the one thing about Microsoft is our approach is one that it's not just, cloud. Clearly, we know that customers will continue to have IT, their own data centers, and servers within their environment in a lot of cases. And so we build on the heritage of Windows Server and sort of that pervasive platform to create cloud solutions. In the case for Microsoft, it's Office 365 for productivity. It is Windows Azure, which think of that as Windows Server in the cloud. It's the compute platform in the cloud. And then Dynamics CRM Online for a business process. Because at the end of the day is that we think about the ability to provide not just the most complete cloud, but the intelligent cloud. And the intelligent cloud is not just about sort of having a place to be able to store my data, but the place that allows me to do the analysis, to gain insight, to connect the dots, and to really empower me to be more effective in my role, to be more effective in my service to citizen, whether it's, working in health and human services and sort of enabling a better scenario for case management, whether it's with, Department of Motor Vehicles or whether it's with police, but, truly creating a more intelligent cloud with all the data that's out there. And so for Microsoft, our government cloud consists of Office 365, Azure, and CRM Online.
Tell us more about sort of how this translates into actual productivity enablement functions.
Well, I think a lot of users are probably familiar with email and the sort of the collaboration heritage that Microsoft has with Microsoft Office. They might be familiar with Exchange. Microsoft Office 365 is that next iteration that truly enables new types of productivity. It allows you to, transform and utilize the cloud Office 365 to, better enable interaction with my peers in the office or with citizens, with customers, to help us be more productive. I talked about insight. I think one thing people understand in this day and age of technology, data is becoming more and more pervasive. We're swimming in data, and yet if I can't extract insight from that data, then, it's really not helping us. And so, that's a critical function for us in the tools that we provide, across our government cloud to truly enable insight into that data and using new ways, whether it's with machine learning or tools to provide that analytical insight. We see across the business world sort of these new business models that are truly transforming and changing the environment from an internet perspective. And we have a number of different startups that we can reference, whether it's SpaceX that's transforming the aeronautical industry or Airbnb that's transforming the hotel industry. You have Uber who's transforming transportation. And government is at the center of that and sort of understanding, from a government perspective, what are the tools that allow governments to transform how they do business with citizens? Because citizens' expectations continue to evolve. They want to be able to interface with government online. They may not understand the hierarchy of government. They just know they have a need. I need to go in and fill out and get a building inspection for work that's being done, or I have a health and human service that I need taken care of. They're looking for that same rich collaboration and tools that they get in the commercial space on the internet to be a function of government as well. And so those are some of the enablers that we've focused on, not just the tools, but the underlying secure infrastructure that truly enables that to happen. And additionally, we recognize that there is a significant investment of existing systems, and so part of the work that we do is, how do we integrate that into the cloud? As I mentioned, we don't, from a Microsoft perspective, the cloud is not just Microsoft's implementation of the services I've mentioned, but we consider your data center the edge of our cloud, and we allow you to integrate your environment into ours in a secure way. We allow you to use our services as backup. You can create these, what you referenced earlier, Bruce, this hybrid model, and creating these tiers of service based on security, based on need, and truly create the platform that helps transform government and move it forward.
Interesting. You mentioned Uber and the idea that the Uberization of public services and government sector might be somewhat surprising to folks, but nonetheless, I think you're outlining opportunities and really a journey that government is on to really get closer to that customer interaction.
Well, it is, and it's actually an interesting point. Actually, I'll reference Steve Case. He certainly is an investor. His history with starting up AOL, but he talks about the third wave of the internet and how the startups that are coming out now, their ability to really understand government regulation and compliance and apply that to drive this change will really fuel new capabilities, and government is at the heart of that. And so that is part of the opportunity, is not sort of just the citizens type service that we think about, but the ability to create economic opportunity for startups to really help fuel this new economy. And I think, that's one of the things that we're very excited about, because we're bringing forward these capabilities in a way that allows government to do it securely and with an appreciation of the other compliance requirements that they have.
Well, that's great. I don't know if you wanted to talk to these very specific areas of government in which Microsoft has a very particular expertise around?
Well, I would just mention, I sort of spoke broadly earlier on my commentary, but, relative to cloud technology, one of the discussion points that I have in my dialogue with customers is the fact that, industry is investing and works hard to make sure that we understand the requirements. You think about the Department of Defense, and you would think, well, they're not going to use commercial cloud vendors like Microsoft, and I'm happy to say that we have a long heritage of working with the Department of Defense and government entities to make sure that we can address their requirements. And the cloud is certainly one of those areas. The CIO for the Department of Defense has articulated, and they have defined, here are the cloud security requirements that we would look for industry to meet in order to do the mission of government, and industry is, providing input, feedback, and sort of, competing for that business to go out there. And so, that's certainly an opportunity. Health and Human Services is one that I believe we're going to talk about a little bit later, and it came out in your findings, because that singular interface to government, in many cases, a citizen is working with multiple departments. Well, there needs to be a consistent case record. It saves the citizen much more time. You create a citizen service that is much better for the citizen. It reduces duplication. It reduces chance of error. The citizen is happy, and it saves time and money for the agencies. And so that's a big area of focus. Government administration and finance, and sort of how we bring this together. Some of these capabilities relative to new business models, new ways of doing business, the open government data models that many cities City of New York, Los Angeles, and others publishing government data, making it available so that government is both transparent and responsive, but creating these data sets that then allow startups to create applications, whether it's an application that better determines, when's the next, bus schedule for my particular location, and sort of mashes that together with the GPS on the mobile device. We see that happening across the country, and it sort of will continue to evolve. And we most recently announced a partnership with NOAA on National Weather Service data that we're putting in our government cloud in partnership with others and with NOAA to make that data broadly available so that others can use it. And certainly in justice and public safety, the discussions around police video and sort of making that police video available, and sort of the proliferation of the cameras that are going out there. It's not just about storing the data, but creating the appropriate business process transformation that allows us to use that data. It allows citizens access from a transparency perspective. Those things are just happening real time in the news every day, and it's an opportunity that's being enabled from a solution perspective by the cloud.
That's a great segue to our first case study that I thought was, well, they were all interesting. I thought this was particularly fascinating. We had the chance to talk to Eric Brashares, who was former Deputy Chief, City of Oakland, and they really have been pioneering the use of police video, and obviously every policeman having video cameras on their person at all times, and really having the chance to enhance their sense of trust and transparency to the publics that they serve. And it's pretty extraordinary, the data, when you look at it, and what it takes to implement what we think, might be a simple idea. Just put a camera on everybody's shoulder and see what happens. Well, what happens is, in a tremendous amount of data, as you mentioned before, particularly we found in talking to Eric that it's upwards of 1 gigabyte of data per police officer per day. So magnify that over the number of police officers per day by, not only by Oakland, but by any police service in the country. And the data requirements are just staggering. And certainly, as Eric said here, the local police department is in need of a lot of personnel and expertise to manage video, and they need some help. And obviously, the cloud is a solution.
Well, it is, and I think the thing here that I think is surprising for many people is just sort of the magnitude of the data, as you mentioned, Bruce. And it's not just the data on the person. I mean, I think people recognize that there's video cameras in the cars themselves. I mean, all this data is good to be able to have, but it creates challenges because the need to be able to store that data, the need to be able to retrieve that data, use that data. There are policy implications relative to how long do we keep the data and manage that, and those are discussions that are playing out across the country today, from a policy dialogue discussion as well as how we roll this out. And I think for us and the work that we're doing in partnership, work that we had done and feedback we got from Oakland, and work with one of our partners, VIEVU, in this regard, is to create a cloud that meets the FBI criminal justice standards and requirements, and create that intelligent cloud that not only can help store the data, but can really help the police force in new ways as they transform to be able to use the data, whether you're interfacing with a district attorney, a defense attorney. There's a need to be able to securely retrieve the data and utilize it in the appropriate way to help in my community policing and making sure that we have a safe city or a safe county. And the great thing about the cloud, whether it's this application or any of the ones that I talk about, is that the cloud is a great equalizer, that no longer do I have to have an internalized T-staff who is competent in setting up servers and, managing storage. In the case here, these cities are being overwhelmed by the amount of storage and the server farms necessary for them to do this. Well, now they can utilize the cloud in a secure way. And so it allows for an implementation. It allows me to stand up if I'm a small county or I'm a small municipal police force. I can move to the cloud and think about it in a new way because Microsoft and their partners are making this service available for me to utilize. And so I think it's a great representative example of how that transformation is happening, and the transformation not only sort of aggregating the data, but the transformation of the role of the district attorney and others to be able to utilize the data in the business process transformation. It's not just sort of about the bits and bytes of the storage, but the end state is you want to have and transform the business process in any of the things that we're talking about, and the cloud is clearly propelling that forward.
That's great. Let's talk about the ecosystem that Microsoft has created around these transforming technologies.
Well, I think the big, the big area for the cloud is creating these data services that you call upon. I think people recognize that, okay, I have a capability, maybe a virtual machine, and I make that available in the cloud. And that's, part of the cloud infrastructure. But it's these new types of service relative to how I assess and analyze my data. How do we use these tools, these analytical tools, to use both the relational and non-relational data, all the information that's coming in, whether we just talked about the police data, but you can, select anything. We're awash in data, and sort of how do you make sense of it all? And so there are significant investments in tools coming out relative to data management and analytics. I think people are familiar with databases and the need to work across databases. And now we have this concept, Bruce, called data lakes. There's so much data out there, there's a data lake, but you need to be able to run, various analytical tools against your data to garner insight. I think, people recognize from a retail perspective of I'm a store, I want to assess, what products are selling and how do I adjust and, do I need to put things on sale? Well, the same is true in this transformation of government. What are my service levels at DMV? Are we having challenges in particular areas? Well, I'm doing fleet management for the Postal Service or fleet management for a particular agency. Are we having challenges with a particular type of vehicle? What is the maintenance records across the buildings that we manage within our jurisdiction? All these things require analysis and assessment. And the one heritage from Microsoft is we've worked hard to create the tools that anyone can use to get that data. There used to be a time where, you would walk down to the data center and there were people with lab coats on and you would say, I need this report. And with personal computing and tools like Excel, everyone had access to the data. And that's what we're doing now relative to the cloud. And yes, it's vast amounts of data, but we're creating tools like Power BI and other tools that anyone can use to gain insight and knowledge and be able to implement them in a cost-effective and fast way to be able to move things forward. So that's, one of the very exciting things for us as we bring out a portfolio of tools. We work with partners. We embrace open source tools as well to be able to do this. And there's a lot of talk about this Internet of Things, in essence, all that is, it's the Internet of your things. These items are becoming Internet enabled, whether it's the light posts within a particular city where there was studies shown that, when the street lights aren't working, crime goes up. And so, by creating and putting sensors to monitor this very cost effectively, you're actually able to reduce crime. You can assess the data, and they've actually figured out and can determine and show that value that, by doing that we can reduce crime. And so there are a lot of different ways that this Internet technology is moving things forward. In public sector, things like automated water meters or automated electricity meters certainly help the city, the county, understand what their peak loads are. It also helps from a citizen service perspective because I can, look on my mobile device. I know what my consumption is. I can create tools. There are a multitude of ways that this Internet of Things brings data together. It allows both the citizen as well as the agencies create the new way to do business to both save money and in the case of the streetlights, help reduce crime.
So maybe from the furthest opportunities around cloud to maybe the more mundane of every day but very powerful proposition that the cloud can help government do more with less, which of course is the mandate for every government service across any sector. And here we found we got a chance to talk to the folks in Miami and the CIO there, Kevin Burns. And of course, he is challenged, like every technology leader in every organization, let alone government, to find ways to drive inefficiencies out of the organization. And certainly, Miami has been shown to be doing that. We found some very interesting ways in which they're migrating some of their basic tools to the cloud to save time and money through their typical applications that once resided on their desktop to helping them with their inspection and scheduling and tracking tools. And of course, as I said, Kevin Burns really reiterates this whole notion that the cloud can help him do more with less.
Well, you said it, Bruce. I mean, I think that's the expectation, for all the CIOs that are within public sector and even the commercial sector. I mean, everyone's being asked to do more and provide more, and part of the reason for this, embrace of cloud technology is being able to enable that in the right way. We think about sort of the world we live in from a office perspective and or our roles, and we email is still sort of a core foundation of how people communicate, how they perform their business function. And so being able to centralize, get all the organization into one email system, it sort of, helps us establish a secure identity that's managed by the organization and allows for us to create an environment that not only can I quickly find people, but I can collaborate on Skype for Business. I can, not just send an email, but I can create messages and communicate that way, or set up very quickly conference calls. It reduces sort of the lag of, being able to, facilitate and discuss and collaborate with individuals. And I might be spread out across the city, a state. We're in a mobile world today, and so you need to be able to do these things from wherever you are. And so that's one of the benefits of Office 365 that our customers are experiencing, being able to stand that environment up and not only do email, but all the other social collaboration and other capabilities that it affords me, and being able to share information and using new tools like Delve and Sway, and being able to show information within my environment. the one interesting thing about business process that people forget about, and sort of, I have this wrapper around government cloud, and we'll talk about case management. But if you think about application development, the core application of email in your calendar probably has the most intelligence about you as an individual and the types of things you do day to day. Who do you meet with? What are the types of meetings? What type of presentations are you sending back and forth to other people? And so part of our work on the intelligent cloud is being able to assess that data based on your feedback and privately and securely, but actually help you to find out those nuggets of truth even in that information, or to allow for the integration of applications into my email system. Whether it's DocuSign and being able to securely sign a document, it's just integrated into that experience. It really creates a new way of doing work, and people find it, much more compelling. It gets us out of this paper chase that we find ourselves in many times, and in particular in the government. That's always a challenge, and it allows us to find this information and act upon it. And so that's one big area of opportunity where we see customers moving. We have over 3 million customers today in our U.S. government cloud on Office 365, and that's been great. And they do that, and they make that move, and then they start realizing, wow, now I can, build out what are some of the other capabilities. And, for Kevin in the city of Miami, it was, we're challenged with all the building the building that's happening now. Wouldn't it be nice to create a better service for citizens as well as our building inspectors, that we had an online tool that allowed for people to see where is the building inspector, because it's tracked to GPS. I can schedule someone. No longer is it, my window where they tell you, well, you need to be home for this full day. Now, I can compress that window so the citizen has a better experience, and it allowed them to reduce the number of calls per month because it allows them to optimize. It creates a much better experience for the citizen, and it reduces the number of phone calls that are coming into the organization. So, those are some of the things when we talk about productivity. It's the combination of the internal as well as the citizen-facing activities.
So I think it's interesting, Kurt, we take for granted some of the basic tools that Microsoft has provided everyone through their desktop experience, and yet through perhaps the opportunity to leverage it better through the cloud, they have an even heightened sense of productivity.
They do, and that's one of the things you think about. Prior to the cloud, I would have my documents on my computer or my documents in the office, and that information stayed, in that container or on my desktop, and you really didn't share the knowledge across the organization. We've talked about knowledge management for decades, and yet the cloud is truly enabling this in new ways. And so when you look at Office 365 and the ability for us to more effectively share documents, but for the system as well, I mentioned capabilities and a technology we call Delve that's part of Office 365. I invite people to go out and look at these new capabilities that are truly harnessed and enabled in the cloud, because it's the ability to find out, well, what are the documents that I'm sharing within my work group? What are the things that the system thinks are of interest to me based on the types of meetings that I have? Power BI is business intelligence, and being able to, create those search tools or be able to have that dashboard that's important to me for my day-to-day environment. And clearly being able to do this securely, encrypting my data to be able to meet government requirements in that regard are important. And so, from a productivity perspective, you harness those capabilities, and then you can build on that from the platform capabilities of Azure to integrate with, other environments that you might have, and tie that together from a Dynamics perspective for business applications, managing your relational data managing case tools, and all these things, they're all seamlessly woven together. You know, if I'm a case manager, I want to be able to make sure that that it's integrated with my email system, because the documents I create, the calendar request I have, I want to be able to see the contacts that I need to have. It's seamlessly integrated, and so it allows for a more productive environment for the employees.
That's great. Let's talk about another specific case of how government organization is adopting the cloud to be more productive and perhaps more importantly, more customer-centric. When the Illinois Department of Health Care and Family Services CIO Stephen DePuter was brought in, and he really was challenged to really upgrade and better manage a process for case management tools across their Medicaid-related programs. And as it says here, it was truly in a dire need of replacement. And yet, how do you upgrade? How do you replace? How do you enhance? And how do you remain in compliance with all the government regulations that you have with all these intersecting services?
I'm excited about the work for Illinois. I mean, they are what we call a cloud-first state. I mean, they have mandates in place that, as they think about how they're going to transform and adapt their legacy applications, that they need to consider cloud options, and they certainly did that as they thought about, how do they address the challenges of managing an $18 billion, Medicaid claims portfolio, and move this forward with speed, security, and scalability. That they have an interoperable system that works in their existing environment, and they work with Microsoft to be able to address that, with our government cloud, and to be able to move that forward and to address those very sensitive interfaces. I mean, you're working with claims data, clinical referrals, and evaluations, and so this data needs to meet the Health Information Portability Act requirements. Obviously, security is very important, and they've been able to do that and implement a system that they were, very proud to say, from the time they sat down to map out the requirements till when they had the system in place and utilizing it, 16 weeks start to finish to get the system up and running. And I think, expectations are accelerating it in the same way that technology is, and so being able to create a solution and a capability and get it up and running and demonstrate those results is certainly paramount in this day and age. And we recognize that, and so we work with our customers to understand how do we move these things forward in the right way. The day and age of these monolithic, very large scale system implementation that take years, that by the time they're deployed, they're already out of date. The citizens and elected officials, CFOs and others, are not going to, stand for that any longer, and so they expect that you're going to be able to deliver on a capability and demonstrate those capabilities quickly. In the technology arena, we call that agile development. Microsoft used to release our products, in essence, basically on a 3-year release cycle. Every 3 years, we would come out with a new release. Now, there's 300 updates to the cloud technology over the course of several months. With the cloud, it enables you to have this agile development, change the way you operate, be more responsive to the feedback of the solution, and update it very quickly. And our customers are experiencing that as well as they develop these types of solutions, not only getting it out there quickly, but continuing to take that citizen feedback or the feedback for the health and human services workers relative to how the system operates, make those changes and incorporate it into the environment.
And getting back to the whole issue around the very specific needs of public service and public sector government agencies. And Kurt, you and I were joking prior to the webinar that perhaps the two organizations with maybe more acronyms than Microsoft might be the government. So tell us about how Microsoft is really managing and understanding and helping to shape the cloud relative to the very specific needs of all these organizations and what their requirements are.
Well, a long heritage from Microsoft, and I'm proud to say in my 25 plus years of being here in public sector that as a company we've been focused on understanding what those enterprise requirements are for government and understanding and appreciating sort of that regulatory environment that they're bound to by law. And so, just as we had focused to make sure the products we delivered that they implemented on premise meet their requirements, we've taken that same approach with the cloud. And so that's a commitment to industry-leading compliance, as well as the compliance necessary to meet, in this case, the U.S. government requirements. And things like FedRAMP there in the middle was a federal cloud capability that the U.S. federal government looks to make sure that your cloud technology meets the National Institute of Standards capabilities. And so we put our technology through FedRAMP certification. We talked a little bit about Oakland, and the FBI criminal justice CJIS requirements is an FBI requirement for criminal justice information that has to meet those requirements in order for states to be able to use a system. And that requirement, by the way, is not cloud specific. Those states, the FBI has had that requirement for all IT systems. So, if I'm Oakland and had that data locally, I have to meet CJIS requirement, and each state has a chief security officer responsible for CJIS, and so we work with the states to make sure that we meet those requirements for CJIS within our cloud environment. I mentioned HIPAA when we talked about Illinois and the Health Information Portability Act, and Microsoft has worked hard to make sure that we not only can meet the technical requirements of HIPAA, but Microsoft as a corporation. And this is true for CJIS, and I think one of the things that distinctly sets us apart in this space is that Microsoft Corporation stands behind our requirements, and they stand behind them and sign the legal contracts to certify that. In the case of HIPAA, it's the Business Associates Agreement that Microsoft Corporation signs on with the customer to validate our ability to meet those requirements. That obviously, there's a binding contract that we sign. In the case of CJIS, we work with the state security officers, and Microsoft steps forward to sign the legal documents, whether it's California, Texas, Pennsylvania, and there's a list of those on our website. We don't leave that up to the end customer or potentially a partner, but it's Microsoft Corporation that stands behind those requirements to make sure that we're providing the most secure capability for our customers and a demonstration of our belief and our commitment to move this forward. IRS 1075 is a requirement for any system that's going to have personal tax information. And you think about sort of the federal government, but obviously state governments have their Internal Revenue Service and tax and treasury departments, and so they have a need to be 1075 compliant in their environment, and so Microsoft follows that. And we talked about the Department of Defense and making sure that you're meeting their requirements, and so those are things that Microsoft is committed to. Actually, just this week it was announced that our products are level 2 compliant from the Department of Defense in the platforms for our government cloud that we talked about. And so, again, a deep partnership that we're focused on, not at a point in time, but ongoing. we work in partnership with the organizations that are represented there that are responsible for those requirements to have and articulate, well, where is technology moving? Where is, and the organizations ask for feedback. They also articulate these are our requirements. And so it's through that collaboration that industry is afforded the opportunity to move forward, and I'm happy to say that Microsoft's very proud in our ability to meet these requirements, as well as many others that are applicable in government. But these are certainly some of the ones top of mind.
Certainly, along those lines, no organization is more concerned about protocols, security than the Department of Defense, one would imagine. And certainly you would think that this would be a bit of a barrier or impediment to cloud adoption, but as we've seen in the people we talk to at the department, there's actually a bunch of pilot programs that they've initiated, and they really are moving forward to try to create, an increased capability and efficiency. No one is immune from the doing more with less, including defense. And in this case, through their healthcare and family services. Talk about the pilot projects that you're working on with the Department of Defense.
Well, there's a lot of areas that we focused on across the Department of Defense where they're looking at both Office 365, and we have some implementations there from a collaboration and email perspective within the reserve community. They are a customer that when you think mobile first, well, that's how they operate, right? That is their heritage, and I think they've always valued the opportunity to utilize, where appropriate, commercial technology where it can help them achieve their mission and help them move forward in the right ways. And so, this capability from a cloud perspective and this technology and a mobile-first, cloud-first approach certainly allows them to do that, and are some of the things that they're thinking about. And so I think it spans, both the areas around collaboration in Office 365, as well as areas of Azure and the compute platform that they're utilizing, both on the mission side, but also what I would deem some commercial implementations and things where whether it's recruiting, whether it's publications like Stars and Stripes, they're benefiting from the cloud in the types of work that they do in service to their population or to the citizens that they're looking to serve.
And maybe you could tell us a little more about how you're thinking about trust and how that relates to, one, the cloud in general, but Microsoft's overall mission as a business.
Well, it's paramount. I mean, the cloud itself is a great enabler, but the trust is a foundational element of being able to utilize that environment. And so, I talked about sort of those standards that we meet and how we work through that, and we enable and sort of publish, publicly where our compliance is, and then as we talk with customers, allow them to see how we meet those requirements and work with them to understand, what their requirements are. Those discussions, it's interesting. I mean, you think that it's not necessarily a checkbox. Certainly there are items that you have to meet with, but the other element of security and trust is basically, sort of is just that. It's trust. What is that interpretation? How do you think about, these elements within your environment? And so that's the type of partnership and dialogue we have with customers in a very transparent way to talk about how we comply, how we control our environment, who has access to this system. For our government cloud, it's U.S. citizens. The databases, the data centers are based in the United States. What are the levels of control? Even the individuals that work in our data centers don't have access to the data in the data center. We have a very prescriptive and controlled way relative to how we provide access to our data to help our customers understand how we comply and how we protect. I think people recognize that, physical protection is clearly there relative to the facilities, but within the data centers, what is your policy? How do you manage access to my data? And what are the controls, and how are they bound from the process perspective? And those are all things that, we talk about and we work through and we've implemented in a comprehensive way to allow us to meet these most stringent requirements.
That's great. And maybe you can speak to how that dovetails with the overall mission of the company.
Well, as I started out, Bruce, we are very focused on really empowering every person and organization on the planet to be able to achieve more. And think about this new world of mobile first, cloud first, and truly embracing and recognizing that it is a heterogeneous environment. And so enabling the Microsoft Cloud and, these types of solutions to operate in an environment that has Linux, and an environment that might have, Apple devices and Android devices, we approach the diversity of the environment that our customers have to truly create a seamless capability wherever they may be operating, and we're proud of that. And what I would say is that we've made great strides to meet the security requirements and policy requirements for our customers, and we're excited to be able to work with them to help accelerate their transformation, and encourage them to look at your white paper as great data for those organizations that are stepping out, but also look at the detail that we provide relative to these requirements, because I think a lot of customers still, sometimes we have our forward lookers, and then we have those who sometimes think, well, we can't do this because of XYZ requirements. I think you'll find that significant investments and advancements have been made to make sure we provide the most compelling capabilities that do meet these government requirements.
Well, that's great, Kurt. We've covered an amazing amount of ground, a lot of different areas, a lot of different sectors, a lot of different organizations with diverse and specific and unique needs that have been challenged but have great opportunities around the cloud. So we encourage you to download the Forbes Insights report, certainly, as Kurt said. Certainly, you can go to Microsoft Cloud to learn more about their capabilities, or to their visit their Microsoft.com/gov to learn more about their government capabilities. I wanted to thank you, Kurt. It is a tremendous amount of experience and insights that you brought forth today, and we thank you all for joining us. And we again encourage you to send forth your questions, and we will answer them forthwith. So again, thank you, Kurt.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate the time. Appreciate everyone listening.
Thank you.